Welcome to Tranquil Chronicles, endless histories for sleepless nights. Tonight, we travel east, across the soft grasses of Russia's southern steppe, to a place where wind hums like a prayer through endless plains, and stars bloom brighter than any city light. Here lies Arkaim, a perfect ring of earth and fire, a city built before Egypt's pyramids, older than Rome's first stone, and yet forgotten beneath time's quiet dust. This is a story of balance, of circles within circles, a civilization that lived not by conquest, but by the rhythm of the sun, the seasons, and the stars. As you listen, let your breathing slow in through the nose, out through the lips, and imagine the sound of the steppe wind brushing tall grass, the faint rustle of tents, and the murmured voices of people who mapped the heavens long before the world called itself civilized. Tonight, we remember them. Tonight, we drift into their dream, the eternal steppe, Arkaim, the sleeping circle of the sky. Chapter 1. The Plains That Waited for Dawn. Before the archaeologists arrived in 1987, the land near the Ural Mountains was only known for silence, rolling grass, wind, a horizon so wide it swallowed thoughts. But beneath that earth, beneath centuries of forgotten dust, a perfect circle lay, waiting, Arkaim. When the first drone images revealed it, two concentric walls, homes shaped by geometry, roads aligned with solstices. It was as if the land had whispered, "Finally, you remembered. The people who once lived here were not nomads, as once believed. They were architects of order, builders of fire altars and sky calendars, watchers of stars and seasons." At night, the circular streets glowed faintly, torches in each courtyard reflecting on copper tools and clay vessels. Children slept to the hum of wind through wooden slats, and beyond their walls, herds grazed beneath a sky so open it seemed to bend toward them as if listening. Some say they built their homes to mirror the cosmos, a celestial model etched into the earth. Others say it was a city of pilgrims, a wheel of time that turned only once. But tonight, as the wind hums softly through your imagination, we are not here to solve Arkaim. We are here to remember how it must have felt, to stand barefoot in the dust of creation, to wake with the sunrise sliding through the eastern gate, to feel, perhaps, that time was not a line, but a perfect, breathing circle. And as the steppe exhales around you, you drift gently into the rhythm of that circle, into the first dawn of Arkaim. Chapter 2. The Circle Beneath the Stars. Night falls slowly over the steppe. There is no rush here. Even the dark seems to arrive with patience. The last embers of the sun dip behind the low hills, and what remains is a horizon lit by fading gold, then violet, then the endless hush of blue-black sky. From the heart of Arkaim, a small fire flickers to life, and another, and another. Soon the entire city glows, a ring of quiet orange light surrounded by sleeping grass above. The stars awaken. There are so many of them, like dust scattered across glass. The Milky Way stretches like a frozen river, and the people of Arkaim tilt their faces toward it as one might look into a mirror. They do not name the constellations as we do today. To them, the stars are breath, each light a life that once burned and still remembers, each cluster a story, each movement a memory passing through the eternal night. The city itself was built to speak with the stars. The outer wall marked the summer sunrise. The inner circle pointed to the solstice moon. even the gates aligned to constellations that rose and fell with the turning of the year. Imagine walking through those circular streets, your bare feet cool against the clay, your shadow stretching softly in torchlight, your eyes lifted toward that same sky. You would hear the quiet rhythm of hammers, bronze meeting stone, a soft hum of chants, and the distant sound of cattle settling in the fields. They believed the heavens and earth were bound together, not separate, but reflections. To walk in a circle was to walk through time. To light a fire was to echo a star. And so, every night, when the sky opened wide, they gathered in the center, elders, children, and dreamers, and whispered prayers in a language that even wind remembers. The words are gone now, but the sound of them, a hum, deep and resonant, still lingers when the steppe winds cross the ruins. They called it the singing of the circle. And if you listen, really listen, beyond the world of your room and your breath, you might hear it too, a low, patient vibration in the air, like the echo of something older than sound itself. In Arkaim, they didn't ask the stars for answers. They simply listened. Tonight, as your thoughts slow and your breathing softens, you too may listen to the quiet between heartbeats, the rhythm that never ends. And somewhere in that stillness, perhaps you'll feel it, the faint pulse of Arkaim, the city that still turns beneath the stars. Chapter 3. The Builders of Silence. The morning after the singing, Arkaim lies still. The fires have dimmed to quiet embers, and a fine layer of ash drifts across the stone paths, carried gently by the first wind of dawn. It is not silence that fills the air, but something deeper, older, a listening silence, the kind that seems to wait for your breath before it moves again. The people of Arkaim rise slowly. Their world does not rush to greet the sun. They move as if each gesture is a ritual, grinding grain, drawing water, opening the wooden gates toward the east. And yet, everything in this city has meaning. Even their stillness has design. The houses curve inward, their doors facing the center, as though they are always watching the fire at the heart of the world. Walls are built not for defense, but for alignment, stone upon stone, guided by shadow and light, each block whispering to the next. It is said that no hammer struck here without rhythm, that no wall was laid without song. When they built, they breathed together a harmony of labor and prayer. And when the walls rose, they did not shout or celebrate. They listened. To build in silence, to carve in patience. This was their devotion. And so the city grew in circles, each layer enclosing another secret, each ring drawing nearer to a stillness at the center. From above, it must have looked like an eye, wide open, unblinking, gazing upward through centuries. There is something beautiful in that, a civilization that believed progress was not expansion, but return. To them, growth meant circling closer to truth, to the quiet that sits at the heart of all things. As the sun climbed higher, the builders gathered around the wells. The water reflected their faces, but the ripples carried the sky, and they believed they were seeing both the heavens and themselves in one single, trembling image. No one in Arkaim claimed ownership of the city. It belonged to time, to the wind, to the unseen rhythm that bound the living and the departed. Some nights, when the fires went out too soon, they said the old builders returned their footsteps, soft, their tools invisible, repairing what had fallen, shaping what had cracked. Perhaps it was myth, or perhaps even the earth remembers the hands that shaped it. If you were to stand there now, among the crumbled foundations and dust-soft walls, and close your eyes, you might hear the same quiet tapping, the faint pulse of work continuing, not by men, but by memory itself. Because Arkaim was never truly abandoned. It merely folded itself into silence, waiting for those who can still hear its rhythm. So tonight, as the world outside fades, as your thoughts slow and drift toward rest, imagine the builders of Arkaim, their patient hands, their measured breathing, their voices humming quietly to the stones. Let their rhythm steady your own. Let their silence build around you. You are part of the same circle now, and the city is still listening. Chapter 4. The Cartographer of Winds. When night returns to the valley of Arkaim, it does not fall, it arrives, softly, patiently, like a guest who knows the way inside without needing a guide. Above the quiet dwellings, the sky unfolds in waves, deep indigo spilling across a horizon stitched with stars. The people of Arkaim do not look at the sky for beauty. They look for direction, for memory, for the whispers of the wind. There is one among them who listens more closely than the rest, an old man named Vaon, the cartographer of winds. He walks the ridges outside the city, his robes heavy with dust, his hair the color of morning smoke. Every dawn and every dusk, Vaon raises a frame made of bone and thread, a kind of primitive compass, yet it never points north. Instead, it turns toward the song of the wind. Each current, each breath of air that brushes the earth, he records with patient hands. On thin slabs of clay, he etches small spirals, curves, and broken lines, not symbols of places, but symbols of motion. To him, the world is not made of walls or rivers or mountains. It is made of movement, and so the wind becomes his map. He teaches the children that every gust carries memory, that the wind sweeping through Arkaim has also brushed the stones of Egypt, the hills of Mesopotamia, and the far coasts where the sun dies each night. To Vaon, all civilizations are connected not by trade, not by conquest, but by air, by the unseen traveler that ties all worlds together. When he breathes in, he whispers the name of a wind. When he exhales, he releases it again, as though returning something borrowed. Sometimes, in the middle of his walks, he will stop suddenly, close his eyes, and raise his hands. The air will still, and then, for a heartbeat, it will shift direction, as if responding to him. People say that the wind obeys Vaon, but he always smiles and shakes his head. It is not obedience, he says. It is recognition. At night, his clay maps are laid out in the center of the city. Hundreds of spirals glowing in the firelight, turning slowly as the flames dance across them. The wind moves between them, as if tracing its own reflection. To watch it is to see something sacred, a communion between what is seen and what is always moving. It is said that before he died, Vaon created one final map, not carved, but sung. He stood in the center of Arkaim and sang for 7 nights straight. No words, only breath, only wind. And when he stopped, the city's air grew perfectly still, not dead, but waiting. Some say that stillness is what lies buried beneath the ruins now. Not gold, not stone, not relics, but the shape of a wind too quiet to name. If you walk there tonight, when the stars begin to swim behind the thin clouds, you might feel it. A single current brushing your cheek, turning toward your ear, as if trying to tell you a secret. It will not speak in words. It will only breathe. And if you listen long enough, you might begin to understand that forgotten civilizations never vanish. They simply move on the air. They become the wind. So rest now. Let the breath of Arkaim carry your thoughts. Let the silence of Vaon's song drift you deeper into calm. You are not lost. You are simply moving on the same invisible map the ancients once followed. Chapter 5. The Astronomer's Mirror. Long before the first parchment held ink, before kings marked borders and scholars named constellations, the people of Arkaim gazed upward, not to seek answers, but to remember. At the heart of the city stood the House of Sky, a circular stone structure open to the heavens. Inside, rows of polished bronze discs lined the floor like quiet pools. At night, they reflected the stars, turning the chamber into a sea of light. To step inside was to stand between two skies, one above, infinite and unreachable, and one below, captured and trembling in metal. The keeper of this chamber was Mira of the Fourth Horizon, an astronomer whose eyes never seemed to rest. She spoke softly, as though afraid to disturb the constellations. Her disciples called her the Mirror Maker, for she believed every star was an echo of something within us. Look not at the stars, she would whisper, but through them. They do not shine for guidance. They shine for remembrance. Each night, she would polish the mirrors until her fingers bled, making sure no dust or breath dulled the reflection. When the night came perfectly clear, she would align the discs in spirals, matching the curve of the heavens above. Those who stood in the center saw stars, both above and beneath, as if the world itself were suspended in light. Mira taught her followers that Arkaim was not built merely on land, but on the reflection of the cosmos, that every home, every tower, every street mirrored the pattern of the stars. She believed the city's architects were guided by something celestial, as if trying to rebuild the sky upon the earth. One evening, while the wind from the steppes howled outside, a young student asked her, "What happens when the stars fade?" Mira looked up, and her reflection shimmered across a dozen mirrored surfaces. "When the stars fade," she said, "it is not the heavens that die, it is memory that sleeps." That night, she unveiled her final creation, a massive disk of obsidian and bronze, so wide that it reflected the entire sky in a single surface. The people gathered around, their faces pale in the cold light. Mira knelt, touched the mirror's edge, and whispered, "This is not a chart, it is a remembrance. A mirror for all who forget who they are beneath the stars." Then she stepped onto the surface, and for a moment, just before the first wind swept through the chamber, her reflection shimmered brighter than the constellations above. When the people blinked, she was gone. Only the stars remained, and the sound of slow, rhythmic breathing, as if the mirror itself had learned to inhale the night. Days later, they found her writings etched into thin slates of metal. They are within, waiting to be seen again. The House of Sky still stands, half buried in sand, its mirrors shattered by centuries of wind and rain. But when the moon rises just right, some travelers say they see Mira's reflection, a faint, luminous shape bending over a pool of light, still tracing the stars that once burned inside her. And if you ever look long enough into a mirror under starlight, you may notice how your reflection flickers, how for a heartbeat your eyes seem to hold constellations, not because you've seen them, but because they remember you. So close your eyes, let the sky of Arkaim drift above you and beneath you. Let the breath of Mira's stars hum softly through your thoughts. The night is a mirror, and you are already within it. Chapter 6. The Silent Scribes. As centuries passed over the plains of Arkaim, the stars still gleamed faintly in the skies above, but the voices that once named them began to fade. Wind swept through the hollow streets, carrying only the whispers of those who once read the heavens. The city's bronze mirrors dulled to black, and the old towers bent under their own memories. Yet, in one narrow quarter, beyond the sleeping wells and the abandoned fire altars, a faint glow still burned. There, within a low domed chamber of clay and stone, sat the silent scribes. They no longer wrote with ink or stylus. Their hands moved across tablets of sand, their fingers tracing invisible words that vanished the moment they were made. Every stroke was erased by wind, yet they continued to write, night after night, as though the act itself preserved what paper could not. The eldest among them was Sarum, a man with eyes clouded by age, but steady hands that moved with the precision of ritual. When asked what they were writing, he would smile and answer softly, "Nothing that can be read, but everything that must be remembered." It was said that the scribes believed language had grown too heavy, too burdened by the noise of the living, so they sought a lighter form of memory, a way to speak through silence itself. They listened to the world around them, to the wind brushing through reeds, to the soft thud of sand against walls, to the rhythmic hum of distant insects. Each sound, they claimed, was a word unspoken, a sentence the earth itself was trying to say. Their tablets were not texts, but places of listening. When a scribe finished a page, he would cover it with a thin sheet of dust and breathe gently across its surface. Only in the motion of his breath could the meaning be found, fleeting, invisible, eternal. Travelers who came to Arkaim in its final days spoke of the scribe's chamber as a dream. From a distance, they saw faint trails of dust swirling like smoke, moving in perfect, soundless rhythm. No words, no light, only motion, as if the air itself were writing its own scripture. It was Sorum who left behind the last record, a single stone tablet buried beneath the threshold. When archaeologists uncovered it generations later, it bore no visible mark. Yet when light struck it at the right angle, a faint impression shimmered, not carved, not painted, but pressed by breath alone. The scholars argued over its meaning. Some said it was a forgotten code, others a cosmic map. But one traveler, a quiet man with dust on his robe, read the pattern differently. He said it was not meant to be read, but heard. He placed the tablet near his ear, and when the wind passed over it, a whisper emerged in silence. All tongues meet. That night, he dreamed of Arkaim, bathed in moonlight and mist. The scribes stood around the mirrors, their mouths unmoving, their hands tracing invisible words across the sky. And though he could not understand their language, he felt peace, the kind that arrives only when meaning no longer matters. When he awoke, he remembered nothing of the dream, except the feeling that silence itself was alive. Now, when the wind sweeps through the ruins, it hums softly through the hollow stones. Some say it is the voice of Sarum, still writing the endless sentence that has no beginning and no end. If you ever find yourself there, in the quiet of a forgotten night, close your eyes, breathe in deeply. You may feel words forming inside your chest, not to be spoken, only to be known, because silence, too, remembers. Chapter 7. The river that forgot its name when the last of the silent scribes grew old and the fires of Arkaim dimmed. The land began to shift once more. The air turned dry, and the song of the wind changed its tune, no longer gentle, but hollow, like breath drawn through empty bone. Beyond the western gate flowed a river, once wide, calm, and heavy with silver reflections of the moon. It had no single name. To some, it was Erith, the lifeblood of the valley. To others, Samar, the tongue of the gods. But one evening, when the stars dimmed earlier than usual, the river ceased to answer any name at all. It simply flowed in silence. The fishermen noticed first. Their nets returned empty. The water's scent, once cool and mineral-rich, now carried the faint bitterness of dust. Then came the farmers, their crops withering at the edges, their wells growing shallow and uncertain. Even the birds that once nested along the banks took flight and never returned. And so began the season the people later called the Forgetting. In the town square, the remaining elders gathered. Among them stood Saram's granddaughter, Illyra, keeper of the last mirror, and the youngest of the scribes. She believed the river's silence was not a curse, but a message, a warning whispered too quietly for most to hear. So she followed it, walking alone beside the thinning stream, marking her path with white stones so that memory itself could trace her steps back if needed. Days passed. The banks narrowed to a thin scar through the dust, and the sound of running water faded to a faint murmur. But Illyra did not stop. At night, she slept to the rhythm of the desert wind, her dreams filled with the faces of those who had already gone. On the seventh night, she reached a hollow carved into a cliff, a cavern that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Inside, she found pools of still water, reflecting strange symbols etched into the stone. They pulsed softly, as though written by the hands of light itself. When she knelt to touch the surface, the water shimmered, and a voice, calm, distant, and slow, rose from beneath it. I am what remains when the tongue grows tired. I am the memory of every forgotten word. When the world forgets its names, I remain. Illyra understood. The river had not died. It had merely grown quiet, waiting for a listener. So she spoke softly into the stillness, her voice almost a whisper. Then I will remember for you. And with those words, the water rippled once, not with sound, but with recognition. It flowed backward for a moment, as if recalling its own beginning. Then the current faded completely. Only silence remained, thick, sacred, absolute. When morning came, the people of Arkaim saw that the riverbed was dry. The white stones that Illyra had left behind now glowed faintly in the dawn light, forming a path that led into the desert and disappeared beyond the horizon. No one ever found Illyra again. But when wind moved across the dry bed, it carried a faint whisper, not of sorrow, but of calm acceptance. The people began calling it the river that forgot its name. But the elders said it was not the river that forgot. It was humanity that no longer remembered how to listen. In the centuries that followed, travelers sometimes claimed that under certain moons, a soft stream of light could be seen running beneath the sand, glowing faintly like veins under skin. They said if you follow it long enough, you can hear the slow heartbeat of the earth itself. And if you whisper your name into that silence, it might remember you long after the world forgets. Chapter 8 Echoes Beneath the Stones. By the time the last trace of the river vanished into sand, Arkaim had grown quieter than the graveyards it once built. Wind whispered through the hollow towers, and the moonlight rested like dust upon the forgotten stones. Yet something moved beneath, not the tremor of footsteps or the burrow of time, but a rhythm deep, patient, and faintly human. The kind of sound that seemed less heard and more remembered. They called it the hum of the buried. At first, the villagers thought it was the wind slipping through the ruins. Then, as nights passed, the sound began to rise from beneath the ground itself, steady, like breathing. Every night, when the stars gathered above the valley, the stones began to sing. It was not a melody one could hum, nor a tone the ear could catch easily. It was the vibration of something enormous, ancient, and half asleep. The echo of a world that had not yet decided whether to die or to dream. One evening a young wanderer arrived, a pale scholar named Ren Varez, carrying notebooks filled with diagrams and questions. He had heard rumors of the humming ruins and had come from the capital to find their secret. Ren set his camp beside the fallen observatory and placed his ear to the cracked flagstones. What he heard made his heart slow its beat, as though trying to match the deep pulse below. He wrote in his journal, "The ground remembers its builders. The earth does not bury the past, it hums it, endlessly, so long as someone listens." The next morning, Ren began to dig. For 7 days he unearthed the corridors of an underground city, halls perfectly round, walls smooth and cold as moonlit marble. At the heart of the chamber, he found a massive circle of stone, not carved, but fused together by impossible heat, as if lightning had once lived there. And upon that circle there were inscriptions, tiny, meticulous, etched by a hand that trembled between art and desperation. Each line pulsed faintly when Ren's lantern drew near. The hum deepened. He realized then these weren't inscriptions. They were frequencies carved into matter. Each mark a sound, each symbol a note, a song recorded into stone. As he traced the spiral of markings with his fingertips, the entire hall began to vibrate, not violently, but with a quiet reverence. Dust rose in the lantern light, turning the air into a living shimmer. And then Ren heard voices, not ghosts, but echoes, words repeating from centuries before, caught between the cracks of the world. The heart of Arkaim still beats below the dust. If you find this, let it hum. Do not silence what we left behind. Ren dropped his lantern in awe. Its flame flickered once and then extinguished. The chamber glowed faintly on its own now, breathing like the chest of a sleeping giant. For hours he sat in the dark, listening, and as he listened, he began to weep, not from fear, but from understanding. He finally knew why the ancients called it the city that dreamed of time. Arkaim had not been abandoned. It had simply withdrawn, choosing to live inside memory, to hum its own existence until someone, someday, remembered the tune. Ren left the next morning. No one saw him return to the capital. But travelers, years later, found his journal buried beside the ruins. On the last page, he had written, "Beneath the stones of Arkaim, the world sleeps and sings. And if one listens too long, one might forget which world he belongs to, the living or the remembered." Chapter 9. The cartographers sleep when the winds of Arkaim finally stilled, and the valley sank again into silence. Ren Varez's journal drifted through hands like a relic of uncertain truth. It was passed from scholar to scholar, from collector to wanderer, until it reached a woman named Ilara Doom, a cartographer from the northern coasts, a woman who never believed in myths, only in coordinates. She was known for drawing maps so precise that sailors trusted her lines more than the stars. But the journal unsettled her, not because of its words, but because one of its pages contained something no one could explain. A map that moved. Under candlelight, the ink shimmered faintly, lines expanding, shrinking, and twisting, as though the land it depicted was still alive. shifting beneath unseen tides. At first, Ilara dismissed it as a trick of the eyes, but the more she watched, the more the ink began to breathe, responding to her pulse. Every time her heartbeat quickened, the lines on the paper rippled, mountains rose, rivers bent, and in the center, always, a circle appeared, marked only with one word in Ren's hand: Arkaim. She couldn't resist. That night, beneath the weight of stars, Ilara packed her compasses, her ink, and her lantern, and set off for the Forgotten Valley. The journey was endless, not in distance, but in feeling. Villages faded from her maps. Landmarks contradicted themselves. It was as if the world did not want her to arrive. When at last she reached the valley's edge, she saw nothing. No ruins, no stones, no hum. Just a field of mist and a silence so deep it bent time. But when she unfolded the journal again, the inked circle began to glow faintly, and from the ground beneath her boots she heard it, a soft pulse. Once, then again, like a slow heartbeat beneath the earth. She set her lantern down and began sketching what she saw, or rather, what she felt. Every line of her pen pulled from the rhythm below. It was no longer mapping geography, it was mapping memory. The map grew longer, the paper heavier, until she realized she was not drawing the world as it was, but the world as it once had been, the ancient Arkaim, rising again on the surface of her chart. She did not sleep that night. She could not. Each time she blinked, she saw corridors beneath her eyelids, rooms filled with lightless gold, and faces carved from air. And somewhere, far below, the hum grew louder. When the morning came, Ilara was gone. Her lantern remained, and beside it, a single sheet of parchment, unfinished, yet strangely alive. The ink was still wet, curling and fading in slow spirals, as if someone invisible continued drawing after she had left. Travelers who later found the parchment swore that when they placed their ear against it, they could hear the faint ticking of a clock, steady, patient, eternal. Some say Ilara had found the city beneath the earth. Others whisper she had mapped her way into it. But the truth, if truth can be spoken of such places, is simpler and far more haunting. Arkaim does not exist on any map, for it is the map itself, a cartography of time, a memory of a civilization that dreamed itself into every listener, every seeker, every whisperer who refuses to let silence be the final word. By the end of that year, Ren's journal vanished. The last person to hold it claimed that some nights, as he drifted to sleep, he could hear the faint scratching of a quill, moving somewhere beyond the wall, slowly, carefully, drawing the shape of his room. And when he woke, he found a circle drawn on the floor beside his bed. One word beneath it, written in ash: remember. Chapter 10, The Dream That Drew Itself. The journal's trail ended where it began, in silence. No records, no relics, no trace of Ren Varys or Elara Doom. Just a whisper among archivists, a myth among wanderers, and an echo among those who dream too vividly. But one winter night, centuries later, a young historian named Myra Salen found herself inside an abandoned library, dust floating like soft stars in the glow of her lantern. The building was a ruin, books drowned in dampness, maps eaten away by mold, except for one drawer. Inside it, untouched by time, lay a blank journal bound in pale leather. It had no title, no author, only a single, faint circle embossed into its cover. She opened it. At first, the pages were clean, but as her eyes adjusted to the dim light, ink began to rise slowly from the fibers, thin, deliberate lines, forming shapes she couldn't comprehend. Not letters, not drawings, something between both. The ink moved with purpose, as if recalling something that had been forgotten too long. Within moments, the page was no longer white. It was breathing. Mira's pulse quickened, her lantern flickered, and for a fraction of a second, the room around her shifted. She was still in the library, but not the same one. The air was clean. The walls glowed faintly, as if carved from starlight. Through the windowless corridors, she saw patterns, perfect circles, moving endlessly, each one reflecting the other. And then she heard it, that ancient hum, soft, steady, patient, like the breath of something eternal, waiting to be remembered. The air shimmered. Mira stepped forward. Each footfall echoed through space, and with every sound, new lines etched themselves beneath her feet. The ground was not solid, it was parchment. Every step she took wrote itself. Words flowed without ink. The dream remembers the dreamer. The map remembers the path. The world remembers itself. She realized then Arkaim was not lost. It had never been lost. It existed wherever memory was drawn. Ren's journey, Ilara's map, the scholars, the collectors, even the myths, they weren't searching for Arkaim. They were being written by it. Arkaim had been drawing them all along. Mira tried to close the journal, but it no longer obeyed. The pages fluttered like wings, ink spilling across the floor and walls, weaving into new patterns, new worlds. The room dissolved, the world folded, and she felt herself falling upward, through ink and time, through centuries of whispered civilizations, each one dreaming the next into existence. When she opened her eyes again, she stood inside a vast city of white stone, familiar, timeless, alive. The air shimmered with soft gold. The sky was motionless, painted, eternal. In the distance, towers spiraled like frozen music, and beneath her, etched into the marble, she saw the same word that had haunted all those before her, Arkaim. But this time, it wasn't carved in stone. It was alive, breathing, with the rhythm of her pulse. A voice spoke, not from around her, but from within the hum itself. Every civilization begins as a memory. Every map is a prayer to be found. And when no one remembers, the dream draws itself anew. Myra tried to respond, but her words came out as lines of ink, spilling gently into the air, forming symbols, then maps, then cities. She realized she wasn't an explorer anymore. She was part of the ink. Her story would become someone else's discovery. Her maps would guide another's search. The circle would never end. Centuries later, when a distant traveler stumbled upon a fragment of an ancient journal, it began with no title, only a few faint words written in pale ink. The forgotten civilizations were never forgotten. They simply turned to dreams and kept drawing themselves into history. And beneath it, a delicate symbol, a circle drawn not in ink, but in sleep. The ink settles, the hum fades, and the world, once more, returns to stillness. For the listener, for you, perhaps it feels like a dream now, a drift between memory and silence, between what was real and what was remembered. But if you listen closely, even now, you might hear it, that faint, rhythmic pulse beneath the quiet, the soft tick of something unseen. Not a clock, not time, something older, something that waits. When dawn rises over the forgotten plains, the sand shifts in perfect, circular patterns, as if drawn by a hidden hand. Archaeologists call it coincidence, poets call it wind, but the ones who still dream in maps know better. They say the earth remembers what the mind forgets, that every echo finds its origin again, that the ruins we unearth are not remains, but beginnings. And somewhere beneath the folds of this quiet world, Arkaim hums on a city not of stone or soil, but of memory. A civilization that writes itself in the breath between waking and sleep. Perhaps that's where we all go when our eyes close, not backward in time, but inward, into that still, eternal library where forgotten histories whisper to those who still listen. As the final lines of ink dry upon the page, a soft wind passes through the room, lifting a few loose papers, brushing the lantern flame. And there, for just a moment, a reflection appears upon the desk, a faint circular mark, not drawn by hand, not by chance, just there, quietly pulsing with life. The mark of memory, the sign of the dream, the seal of the forgotten. It fades slowly, but the warmth of its light remains, lingering in the air like a breath, a heartbeat, a gentle reminder that nothing truly disappears, only rests until it is dreamt again. So now, as you drift deeper, past the edge of thought, past the borders of sound, let these echoes carry you. Let the world of forgotten civilizations fold into your rest. For in the silence that follows this story, 1,000 untold worlds continue to hum softly beneath your sleep, waiting for dawn, waiting for you. Good night, traveler. And remember, history never ends. It only dreams.